every entrepreneur fears, and that is losing it all. Losing your savings, losing your friends, losing your business, losing your family, losing all of it, right? Because you bet so much on yourself and you put so much pressure on yourself that if you're not careful, you actually could end up losing it all. And that's why you need to know how not to lose it all. I'm talking about watching your savings vanish, your business crumble, and your confidence shatter. I've been there, I felt it deep inside of me, and it's crushing, it's debilitating, and the paralyzing fear of starting all over again. Every setback that's coming your way or that you're dealing with right now can be your next level up. Like, it really can be your next level up. It may not feel that way because you're in the middle of the storm and it's like, this is very painful and you feel alone and you feel like, you know, there's no hope, and then you feel like this is the end and that your days are numbered. Like, it's actually a very common feeling of like, it's all gonna be over. And the funny thing is the difference between those who bounce back and come back again winning another day and those who don't often really comes down to this critical decision, which is, do you want to quit and go home, or do you really want to push through? Like, what people have to understand about success is that the difficulties are naturally going to present themselves. That's just a given. The real question is, you know, and the difference between the winners and the losers are that the winners are comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is really the common denominator that most people are missing. If you're just seeking comfort in being an entrepreneur, you're most likely not going to be successful, because what you're seeking is not what it is. It's like saying, I want to be the best linebacker in football, but I don't want anybody to touch me. That's really what you're saying. If you're saying that as an entrepreneur, you're never going to be a successful linebacker if you have this idea that you never want somebody to hit you and you never want to get bruised and you never want to break a rib. That's part and parcel with being a linebacker. And so what I've discovered is being an entrepreneur and going through all the situations that I've gone through, breaking my ribs and getting bruised up and banged up and being left unconscious and all this stuff, is that's something that you have to learn to embrace as an entrepreneur. It's not something you really want to run from. It's something that you want to just get used to. And I like to call it mission ready, you know, where you're just essentially always mission ready. You always got your bug out bag. You're always ready to roll. You're always ready to run. That's such a big part of it. I think so many entrepreneurs get it wrong. They think that they're seeking this life of comfortableness and comfort, and that's not really what it is, man. It's not what it is. It's not even close to what it is. It's a constant push. It's a constant waking up, and essentially, like, you got your parachute on your back, and it's like at any day, on any minute, you're gonna get a call that you gotta go jump out of a plane, you know, in the middle of the night and land in Guadalajara or something. You know, like, that's what it is. If you're not okay with living in that world, then you're very unlikely to make it as an entrepreneur, particularly in the beginning years, because when you're in your beginning years, that is just part and parcel of being an entrepreneur, right? It's like being a linebacker. You know, every day you're just getting hit. You're getting hit every single day. The interesting thing about losses is people think that losses is really just like, oh, you lost something. But you know, yeah, you can just lose something, but the other thing is you can lose time because you didn't prepare correctly. So one of the things that I really lost on was, as I was building my business, I didn't focus on the fundamentals of my accounting, which was my weakest area, right? I didn't focus on my balance sheet. I didn't know what retained earnings was. I didn't understand, you know, really the profit and loss from an accrual perspective. That really created huge losses for me later because I lost time. Because I had to then go back and I had to spend years fixing and creating my business to where I had to fix my balance sheet. Like, my balance sheet was a mess. And it's something you don't think about as an emerging entrepreneur because you're just trying to make payroll and rent and, you know, your expenses. But the thing I wish that I would have done was very early on had a strong accountant, CPA, bookkeeper that was just kind of managing the day-to-day and closing out my financials correctly and spending time learning about what a balance sheet is. Because when you get to a point in your business where you're successful and you're making money and then you want to be bankable, right? Like the next stage of being an entrepreneur is you want to be bankable. You don't always want to be the scrappy entrepreneur founder. You want to emerge yourself into a very sophisticated CEO. You want to then emerge yourself into an investor. Like you want to be able to think with these different levels that you need to get to. Getting into a CEO role and thinking like a CEO is thinking with a broader stroke. Right? It's a broader brush. And you have to really start thinking about the bankability of your business. How bankable are you? What does your balance sheet look like? What's your debt schedule look like? How much debt do you have as a business compared to your revenues? What happens if your revenue gets cut in half? Are you still able to survive? These are the things you never really think about, when you're starting out, because again, you're just trying to make payroll and rent, right? One of the biggest things that I've had to do that I lost a lot of time on was I didn't pay attention to those things. And then I found myself with this, successful business, but yet my accounting was the show. So I had to spend the greater part of 3-4 years really understanding it, increasing my knowledge about it. So I watched a tremendous amount of YouTube videos about finance and accounting, understanding the basic fundamentals of accounting, understanding a balance sheet, understanding what are retained earnings, understanding what are capital contributions. And now I can look at a balance sheet and I can have a pretty good idea now, or very good idea now of exactly what the health of the business looks like. And that's what bankers are looking at. Bankers are looking at the health of your business. The first thing they want to look at is your balance sheet, your cash flow statement, your income statement. And if you don't know what those things are and how they flow and what the meaning of an income statement is compared to your balance sheet or your cash flow statement, you're not going to be as sophisticated as a CEO as you'd like to be. And you're going to find yourself in conversations with other sophisticated investors, bankers, CEOs, and you're going to feel inadequate because you don't really understand the information, how they're looking at it, and the nomenclature, right? Because if you don't understand the nomenclature, you don't understand the words and what they're talking about and what it means, you're also going to find yourself feeling inadequate. So with that said, I lost a tremendous amount of time. So that's one tactical thing that I did, was I educated myself about it. I continue to educate myself about it. I spent a lot of time on a monthly basis talking with my accountant and my CFO and really understanding how they're looking at the business from a bankability standpoint. And that's the other thing about being an entrepreneur, is you don't want to also then become paralyzed because you start thinking like an accountant. Accountants don't think with growing a business, they think with beans. It's a very different mentality. An entrepreneur thinks with, how do I build this thing? No matter what it takes, I got to do it. And they're not thinking with beans. They're just thinking with, I'm going to make my own beans, or whatever it is, right? So it's a very different way of thinking. It's right brain, left brain type of thing. You got to be able to start blending the two to some degree. You got to understand what they're thinking, what you're thinking, how it matches. Does it make sense? Does the business decision that you want to make as an entrepreneur make sense from a balance sheet perspective or not? These are all the things that end up you never really worried about before. Then all of a sudden now it's something that you're talking about every single week, because it's the difference between adding $10-20 million in value of your business simply because you understood how to correctly categorize things and layer on debt in the right way or not, that added value to your business. It's huge. The second big thing that I had to do as an entrepreneur that was really crucial for my business was I had to start thinking with accountability. And not just accountability for myself, but accountability for other people, in the sense of, when you're running an organization, as big as, a couple of hundred employees. So we have 520 employees, and we have offices in Tampa, we have offices in Washington, D.C., and we have offices in Medellin, Colombia. So with 525 employees, if your topic is not accountability, you're going to end up, in a lot of trouble, because you first have to take accountability for your position as a CEO. What does a CEO need to do? What do they need to think with? How do they need to think? What are the important metrics that the CEO should be looking at? These are things that you should make a list of as a CEO. Like, I have a list as a CEO of all the things that I need to be looking at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And those are specific metrics that I know that if I don't look at, I'm not accountable. right? So that's me. But now you have your juniors, you have your CFOs, and you have your managers and your VPs and all of these managers. And some of them will understand the metrics that they need to look at, but most of them will not. So what you have to think with is, what are the metrics that you need them to be looking at every single day, every single week, every single month, and then give them those metrics, right? I've given my people their metrics. I'm like, okay, if you're responsible for making sure, for example, patients send their devices back, these are the 2 to 3 to 5 metrics that you need to be looking at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, like a hawk, to really understand and control your area. And then I hold them accountable. Like, the biggest thing that you should never do is not hold them accountable. If you think that it's good for you to always go down there and do their job for them, then you got the wrong person, right? You have to be thinking with, I need this person to be accountable. So for me as a CEO, when I start hearing noise from a department, all I know instantly, I don't care who they are, I just know they're not being responsible. They're not taking control of their area and managing it correctly. And so as a result, it's starting to leak out, right? Like, departments are like, they're cubes filled with water. And if the manager's not managing right, the cube starts to leak. And when it starts to leak, it starts leaking on your head, and you're sitting there in your office and you start getting drops on your head. And when you start getting drops on your head, that's when you got to really pay attention, take action, and be like, okay, what the hell's going on? Why am I getting drops? And don't just explain it away like, oh, that's just normal. Everybody gets drops. No, everybody doesn't get drops. Like, it's not normal to get raindrops on your head sitting in your office. Like, you're paying somebody to manage a department. Hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. And if they can't do it, get somebody that can, or train them up to where they need to be. Because you either can train somebody to what you want them to be, or they just can't. They just can't. And if they can't, it's fine. Don't do your business an injustice by keeping somebody in a department that doesn't manage the department. Like, it's a complete injustice. You should never do it. Never do it. The third tactic definitely is, you got to take a step back. The thing I'll tell you is that if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. I'm not a big sit around thinking type of guy. Like, I don't, I've heard people that they schedule think time. That would be like painful for me. I don't do think time. So I act in the moment. But if it doesn't feel right, I don't do it. Like, every decision you make's gotta feel right. It's gotta feel in your gut. Like, that's the killer instinct, right? That people talk about. It's that killer instinct, hey, you know what? This just feels right. It's not an emotion. It's a knowingness that the decision you're making is just the correct decision, regardless of how the other person's gonna feel, right? Now, again, you're not trying to inflict pain on people, but the right decision is just the right decision. And you feel like it's the right decision. The other person may think it's a brutal decision, but the best decision is always the best decision for the business. Like, if the business wins, it's a winning decision. If the business loses and your stats and your numbers go down as a result of your decision, then yeah, it was a horrible decision. But making the right decision always feels right. Making the wrong decision usually always feels wrong. So if it feels right, go with it, and don't second guess yourself and get into this space where you're just like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, just go with it, follow it through. In my experience, when I've gone against something that I knew felt right, I always messed it up. So I just stopped doing that, and I said, you know what, I'm just gonna trust my gut. If I feel in my gut, my instinct, that this is the right decision, I'll go with that. And I always encourage people to go with that. Like, you always know, dude, you always know. Your biggest setback in life, your biggest setback in business can become your biggest gift, but it's only if you look at it from that lens. You gotta remember, you signed up for this. You gotta live in uncomfortableness until you get to a point where you can smell the roses a lot more. But when you're first starting out, it's scrappy, it's hard, it's up and down. You're dealing with so many different things, and you just gotta understand that that's just another level for you to increase your skill set and become smarter and better and stronger. And if you keep the mentality that you never give up, you will absolutely get there. I promise you, you will get there. You will get on the other side of this thing, but you can't give up. You can't quit, and you got to keep going. So I hope that helps.